Welcome, everybody, to the Interagency Briefing for public involvement for crisis and transit disruption. There's none of that happening today. No disruptions at all in anybody's lives. So I don't know why anybody would come here and talk about that. So, and with us, we have Delcino Miles. She is the CEO of the Miles Agency, like the Ohio State University. So welcome aboard there, Delcino. And you're out of Virginia Beach, right?
That's right. Virginia Beach, Virginia. Thank you. Good morning.
Glad that you are here today. There's a lot of folks that are here today. We want to welcome, and they're all over the place. They come from every place. Agencies, I think it was like 26 different agencies. So if we missed yours, we apologize. We did our best to be able to welcome everybody. You're still welcome, even if you're not on here. That's just the way it is. We will be, I'll give you some introductions. We'll let you know who Delcino is and the Miles Agency, but we really want to get into the meat and potatoes of what is public involvement and engagement. And we'll talk about your plan for strategic public involvement. We'll get some of your questions and hopefully give you some answers, as well as procurement options and additional resources that you will get as part of being here. Some briefing control pieces here. You can control, if you like the way that my nice blue tie works, you can make us look bigger, or you can make us disappear altogether if you don't like it. But you grab this little doodah. If you haven't done one of these, I don't know what rock you're living under, but you can drag this and make it large. Maybe on the bottom, maybe on the top or the side, but you can grab that, you can make us bigger and be able to engage with us. And speaking of engagement, you can open that panel on the right-hand side by that little arrow thing. You will see handouts there, and in those handouts you will find the briefing presentation, some sample materials, as well as Delcino Miles's capability statement. You can also raise your hand, and we have somebody that had a hand raised. I'm going to look back at it in a minute, but you can chat questions with us back and forth. We do encourage dialogue, right, Delcino? We would Absolutely. We don't want to just be sitting here talking. If you did call in on the phone, there's some folks that are on the phone. Make sure you enter your audio pin so that we can unmute you. And you can always reach out at govsupport@themilesagency.com. And if it's something you want to take offline, perfect way to do it. And we'll make sure we get those questions answered the way that you need them answered, if we possibly can. This is not affiliated or endorsed by any agency. It's provided to you, the audience, for informational purposes only. All participation in this briefing is voluntary, and engagement of you government people is not an indication or endorsement of purchase from anybody. And that we just want to do that. You have to have that so that you can dialogue with us and nobody gets into trouble. So we will be engaging you also with polls. So tell us, why are you here today? Are you here because you work in communications and PR? I have a public engagement challenge right now. I know there's some folks that are here that have already said that. I need to update our agency communications plan. And you can choose as many as you want, I think. And I want to learn more about public engagement communications, or my boss made me come. And we have people that are already queuing up on that. All right, we'll give you another 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and there you go. Let's take a look here, Delcino. Here's what we know. A lot of folks want to learn more about public engagement communications, which is very interesting because that is exactly what we're going to be talking about today. And then, some folks actually have an issue right this minute. So we appreciate that. So Delcino, tell us about the Miles Agency based in Virginia Beach, Virginia.
Absolutely. Thank you for this opportunity, Dave, and good morning, everyone. We've been in business now for 30 years. We celebrated 30 years last year. We're based here in Virginia Beach, Virginia. We're just a few miles from North Carolina and just a hop from Washington, D.C., in case you're not familiar with that part of the country. And public relations, community engagement, that's our wheelhouse. And developing strategies and plans for clients. And the lion's share of our clients are public agencies. So we work with transportation, we work with Department of Defense, we work with labor and the National Park Service more recently. So that's developing not only strategies and platforms, but also mechanisms where you can measure your success. And so that's important too in communication. So you see the bullets there. various certifications, but communications, and that's across all demographics. That could be if English is the second language, that could be people of color, it could be Southerners and Northerners. But we try to make sure that our messaging resonates with the target audience. So there's no one-size-fits-all communications plan.
And you are absolutely right. There is not a one-size-fits-all. And it's amazing to me because you really spend a lot of time in transportation. And when we first started talking about how this works in communication, that is a very niche-oriented place that I'd never really thought about, but I've been the beneficiary of hearing from things like that because we've all experienced road closures, or here in Maryland, we had one many years ago where they shut down the entire JFX from the Beltway all the way into the city so they could just revamp it. And I remember all those communications happening on the radio and television, telling people what to do and how to maneuver. Right. So let's get right into this and talk about what is public involvement or engagement, and how does that, just from the top, tell us what that means.
And I make that distinction between involvement and engagement on purpose. Involvement, you tend to think of just getting information to people, just getting it out there. As you mentioned, you know when the lane closures are going to happen. You know when someone's going to come in and disrupt your community for whatever reason, where they're putting in more sewage pipes or something like that. And then with this COVID, for instance, it's one thing to get information to the public, but you want to engage them, get some feedback. So that's the engagement piece. And so that's where the internal, external communications and the message development, all of that comes into play. All of these elements are in your plan. The internal would be members of your team within your agencies. That's your staff. That's maybe your director. That could be the secretary of your respective department. Those are the folks that you work with on a regular basis. So you can make sure that everybody's on the same page with your message. And whether it's COVID, whether it's if it's FEMA and there's been a natural disaster, where do people go for help, whether it's for food or supplies and that sort of thing. In transportation, it's when is this project going to stop? When are you going to stop disrupting my life with all these traffic and these cones that you see in the road? So it's real time, and it's important to make sure that the internal staff are on the same page, because you don't want people on the same team having different messages. That causes confusion, and that can turn into a crisis, more of a crisis. And then manage your expectations. Make sure what you put out there is realistic. So if you know that your staff is going to be working from home for a while because of COVID, and don't say that, well, we'll be back in the office by September 30th. That's probably not realistic given the conditions that we're in. So, but it's helpful to continue the communications process to give people updates on what the status is with a particular subject matter, whether it's a transportation project. We're working on that right now with the VDOT, Virginia Department of Transportation, the largest project in history of the Commonwealth. $3.8 billion project, Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel expansion. We're putting in 2 new tunnels and expanding about 10 miles of highway. And so you can imagine there are a lot of moving parts, because we're crossing a major channel, the Chesapeake Bay, and there's military involved, there's a port involved, there are boaters, recreational boaters, as well as your commuters and your tourists. So there are a lot of audiences that we need to reach out to. And so we have to make sure our message is on point in terms of what's the status of the project, whether it be noise, whether it be dust, who do you call with a complaint, who do you call if there's an issue. An interesting issue, Dave, you may find this amusing, is that birds were an issue, because there was an artificial island in the Chesapeake Bay where some of the birds from the north made it a home. It was a nesting place. It was artificial. And so the project called for the island to be paved over in order to bring equipment in and start the dredging. Well, there was a segment of out there who love birds. So there had to be a communication plan in place to address this issue. And so we did address that issue. And actually, we partnered with the Natural Resources Department. So that's another piece of your engagement plan, is developing and cultivating partnerships to what I call deputized stakeholders to assist you in disseminating your message, whether that is affinity group, whether that's if you're National Park Service, you may want to partner with Sierra, the Sierra Club. If you're with FEMA, you probably want to partner with the Red Cross, those kinds of things.
That's
So that's
interesting.
part of,
What
yeah.
do you call that? You call that deputizing?
Well,
That,
that's not a communications term. That's my term. That yeah,
I
you
like it though.
basically
That's a cool term.
you cultivate relationships and partnerships with others who perhaps are looking are looking to communicate with similar audiences. So in transportation, it could be engineering organizations.
And
It could be, for that matter, it could be the Sierra Club, because maybe, particularly if you're going to be cutting down trees or
yeah,
disturbing natural habitat and those kinds of things. And if you're crossing water, natural body of water, then you want to make sure that environmentalists have a voice at the table as well. That's just one example.
and I love that. And that kind of dovetails right into your identifying your influencers, because that can be leveraging your influencers to be able to get the information out there, as well as the communication platforms. And we know that there's plenty of different platforms now, a lot more than just radio and TV from yesteryear, right? And
That's
newspaper,
right. That's
right?
right. That's what I meant by there's no one size fits all. So, so engineers, or whether you're an engineer, whether you're a high school teacher or you're a doctor, we all have different forms of communication. My mom still takes the newspaper. So for certain demographics, you may want to have an ad or something, or op-ed in that newspaper if you
Yep.
want to reach that particular demographic.
That's right, and using op-eds as a methodology too is a great move. So when you're thinking about communication within your agency, what is it that you have the most issues with? Is it managing the internal, external communication? Is it some kind of internal, external? Is it developing the messages for diverse audiences? You mentioned this earlier, Decino. It's not even just let me read the rest of these, just make sure. Leveraging social media, that's platforms, that's great, or something else, please contact me. But when you mentioned, it's not the it's within whatever the pocket of the most, and not even the most, but you have English speaking, and then you have non-English speaking, which can branch out in multiple directions, as you know. And then you also have North and South and different cultures, right? So it's not just about foreign languages per se, right?
No, no. Diverse means a lot of things. It could be geographic, gender, um, generation, special interest. It could
Hmm.
be if you like the environment, you like politics, or you like sports. So just depends on the interest. So diverse is just that.
Yeah,
It's a way of segmenting your audiences and making sure the message resonates with that audience.
yeah. And going back to your influencers, love that. Deputizing your influencers, love it a lot. And then think about how that happens within the organizations. Because if you can't get buy-in from influencers, you're in big trouble.
Right. That's yeah. And they tend to be vocal. If they're not supportive of whatever project or policy or
Oh,
information that you're trying to get out there.
believe you me, I'll tell you what. Whenever we do something that somebody doesn't like, that the ones that are the most irate are the ones that come out the fastest and the loudest. That's for sure. All right, we'll give you another
That's right.
3, 2, 1, and it's painless to do these. All right, there we go. Let's see what people are saying. We got 44% managing internal external communications, and then the next one up is social media platforms. So yes, definitely,
Mhm.
very cool, very cool. All right, so when you're getting into this plan, right? For whether it's you're developing a plan or revamping a plan or make, certainly adjustments to the plan. The plan that you had at January 1 for this year is no longer valid. That's a
That's right.
fact. That's a fact,
That's right.
because we're all up. It's none of our fault. We're all in this together, but we got to have a different plan and a different course of action. So take us through how this works.
Well, depending on the agency, and I know we have various agencies on the call. Let's determine what your objectives are. What is it that you're trying to accomplish? Is it a matter of just having a fresh plan to take care of internal communications? And I saw that was I think the highest vote getter from that
Yeah.
poll. Um, Whether it's streamlining communication and maybe media training, all of that should be in your plan. Identifying who would be the spokesperson for your agency, for your department, and make sure that person is adequately trained to deal with the media. We do that as well. Identifying your audience. That could be, and your audience is internal as well. Do you have your report to your colleagues may be different than the report to the secretary of your department? There may be different data in there. The secretary may want a more in-depth report. Media is just going to want something, they're going to want something short and sweet, just some bullet points and talking points, and something simple. And what's the best way to reach them? Depends on the audience.
Something they can argue about. Just saying.
I'm sorry?
Something they can argue about.
That's right. That's right. and then if your audience is the media, then you're going to develop a press release or some talking points or a fact sheet, maybe some visuals if what you're doing is visual. Particularly in transportation, is very visual, or whether you're FEMA, where you're showing workers out there helping those who are in distress because of some natural disaster or some other crisis. And what's the best way to reach them? Well, if you're in a crisis situation and phone lines are down, and what's another way to get around that if you don't have access to the technology because a tornado just ripped through your community? So you have to look at all those kinds of things. And with COVID, best way to reach the audience, our governor gives weekly briefings, virtual briefings twice a week on what the state is doing to combat COVID and to give the latest data in terms of the number of cases, positive cases, that sort of thing. So it's constant communication. That's one thing about your plan. It's not one and done. You have to continue that flow of communication. Keep all lines open, whether it's social media. And social media, and again, that depends on your audience. If you're dealing with younger people, then you may deal with Instagram, Twitter, LinkedIn, those kinds of things. If you're dealing with olders, we ran all the kids off the Facebook, so that's where the older people are on Facebook. They'll tell you. And what do you want to say? That's your talking points, your message points. And that's where the internal stakeholders need to agree what those talking points are. What is it you want to convey? And one thing, I'm a political junkie too, and I'm not politicizing this, but one thing in politics is when you get tired of hearing your talking points is just when people start to pay attention. So repeat those talking points, no matter how many speeches you've given, how many times you've put it on Facebook, how many times you've had your video running on YouTube channel. Keep repeating it, because that's when people just catch on. Dave, how many times did you have to send out the notice about this particular briefing just to make sure? Because there's a lot of communication hitting all of us.
That's right.
Whether we're getting a tweet, we're getting a text, we're getting an email. And so it's you have to weed through that and break through the noise.
Absolutely. And you never know which one they're going to see or which one they
That's
actually. Right. And then it's all about timing, right? Because maybe there was something that happened today that was like, oh, somebody sent me a briefing on this crazy crisis stuff, and oh, that's what I need to do. So absolutely. So you're 100% right. So getting to a place where you get your information out there, and then I love the fact that you're looking at what is the outcome that you want from that right. Communication. And
that's right. What does success look like? What does you want to do? Do you want people to sign up for a briefing? Do you want people to attend a public meeting or a webinar? Those kinds of things. Do you want more people to sign up for the payroll protection loans? Do you want more small businesses engaged versus the big businesses? And you start to take a look at that data, because everything we do is data driven in marketing. This isn't stuff we pull out of the air. So we work very closely with research specialists, and that helps us to really focus on what we're trying to do. So using that data certainly helps us in developing our engagement plan and looking at those outcomes. Then you measure success, and you continue to monitor to make sure that your outcomes, maybe you need to shift what your outcomes are going to be. You have to have that ongoing monitoring to make sure that you're on point.
You're absolutely right, because if there isn't that feedback loop, and we are creatures that tend to do things linearly, right? We start, we finish, and then we're on to the next start and the next finish. And oftentimes we miss that feedback loop coming back around. And that's one of the things. It's one of the reasons why the data, we're doing another briefing tomorrow on data and survey collection. It is an incredible time, specifically for anybody that's dealing with, and we're all dealing with it in some form or fashion, but anybody that's dealing with the communication side of it. So let's look at a case study here where you have, and this one I think has to do with eminent domain, which Eminent domain means they're tearing down your house, right? So semi-sensitive information, semi-sensitive topic, right? So tell us about how this can work, because you've handled a lot of these, and if you think about crisis and what puts people into a crisis and what gets people wound up, and how to manage that that crisis is really, I don't know of anyone that's any hotter for individuals than eminent domain if it happens.
Yeah, eminent domain, basically where the government can procure your property at a fair market value. They don't just come and snatch it. But that tends to happen a lot on some road projects, because if someone is close to where, if you want to widen a highway, for example, and there's some houses along there, then you're going to have to talk to those individuals. And a lot of times they don't want to sell. They've been in that house, for 100 years. Their family's been there. They grew up there. And so it can be emotional. And so it's best to sit down and have a talk with those individuals. But overall, that it has to be for public good. So in this case, it may be widening a highway. You're going to put in a new government building or that sort of thing. Fortunately, on the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, we're not taking any properties, but we did have to negotiate with one of the historically Black colleges, because we had to go onto their property to do some surveying and some other improvements. But we're not going to be taking their property. But that was an opportunity to sit down and talk with them and hear what their concerns are, and with an empathetic ear. We have to listen to what they want to say and come up with a solution. So with eminent domain, that's scary for a lot of people, thinking Big Brother's going to come in and take my land. But no, it's not as simple as that. You have to negotiate with them, sit down and forge a relationship. That's where that cultivation and deputizing those that have credibility in that community. That could be an elected official, that could be the civic league leader, that could be someone else that is from that community, that understands the greater good for a project that unfortunately where eminent domain may be required, where you have that, where it's not the government speaking, it's not someone from your agency speaking, that you're coming alongside someone they already know and trust, their neighbor, their pastor, their mayor, their city councilman, their school board member. That's what's important. And so your message points are fine, but you still have to have that empathetic ear when it comes to something this emotional and this personal, and making sure you're on the same page.
I agree, and you start with your internal message first, and make sure everybody's kind of got it all together. Because, like you said, if you start getting pinged from different places, the confusion can cause another crisis that may be worse than the crisis that you're in. So you start with the internal message, move the external message. And that is, again, whoever your audience is, right?
Right. That's once we're all on the same page and we understand what the message is, and if it's eminent domain, here are the message points. This is why we need to do this, because this is a project that is going to improve traffic flow, or what have you. Whatever the benefit is to the public, that needs to be among the message points. And then the external message, that's goes right here, tailoring that message to your audience. So whether that's media, they just want to know, why are you taking Miss Johnson's house? Miss Johnson's been around. She makes great apple pie. Why are you taking her house? So and it could be elected officials. Certainly they want to know, because particularly if it's an election year. Here in Virginia, it's an election year. Well, I guess across the country it's election year, but we in addition to the president, we are electing some local officials as well.
All over.
And so make sure they're on board, and making sure that they're informed, because the last thing you want to happen is for an elected official to get a call from their constituent complaining about something that you did not brief them on. So make sure that they're in the loop. And then the general public could be, and you can break that down too. It could be special interest groups, whether it's environmental, whether it's a historic society. You all are reading the news like I am about the issue with the Confederate monuments coming down, and that's a local issue. And so it takes a lot of communication to develop a game plan as to how to deal with that issue that's satisfactory to all the parties.
That's exactly right. And then you get to the place where your results. And again, if you're not measuring it, you can't manage it. So making sure that you're measuring your results and getting that input, really important for that feedback loop again, right?
Yeah. We pride ourselves on making sure that we talk to stakeholders on a regular basis. We constantly are looking for that feedback. How are we doing? And I'll give you a perfect example where I was the PR person for the contractor who had a contract to build 5 schools under one contract under the PPEA Act, and we reached out to the PTAs, we've reached out to the students, we reached out to the faculty, we reached out to those in the community, and got their feedback. And we had online surveys where we gave them options. Do you like this type of brick or that kind of brick? Here's the type of landscape that we're going to have. And they gave us that input. And that had an impact on the architects, where it really went back and revamped some of their drawings and some of their design of the schools, because this school will belong to them. And so, and we made sure that we were sensitive to that. And so that's at the local level, but you can do it at the state level and at the federal level. Listen to what people are telling you. I'll give you the more recent example would be the payroll protection. What are some lessons learned from that process? What could have been done differently? What can we tweak now if we do another round of stimulus checks or what have you? So listening to the public, in this case, you might want to listen to your bankers, listen to the small business community and others who either were beneficiaries or felt left out of that process. So reevaluate that, go back and talk to those bankers. What could have been done differently for this process to process those loans? And what are the parameters for those who can qualify for those loans? And for those who did not qualify, what can we go back and tell them? What can they learn from this experience?
Yep, and bringing in those, adjusting your policy and doing best practices and improvement. That's all what it's all about. So let's talk about stakeholder management, because this is part of the biggest piece, is making sure that you're understanding your stakeholders, who they all are, and then managing that process. So tell us about that.
Well, we use a database system where it's easy for us to identify who those stakeholders are, and we segment them by interest or by their industry, whether it's educators, whether it's engineers, whether elected officials, or what have you, or environmentalists or military. With this Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel project, it's all of those. We have the military, we have the port, we have industry, we have the tourism industry, we have the educators, and we have the traveling public that we need to communicate with. So we do have a database and we build that database a couple of ways. One, when we have meetings, the public meetings, we have sign-in sheets, so we build it that way. We send out a newsletter on a regular basis, and people can opt in for that. We do it that way. And also we conduct community briefings, if you will, and we get it that way. So to give them an update on what's going on with the project and the status and all of that. So the internal piece, that's the easy one, because those are the folks you work with on a regular basis. The
That's
external,
right.
That's the media. We help you to update your media list to make sure that this reporter covers a particular beat, whether they cover education, law enforcement, or politics, or what have you. Make sure that you have accurate media database. And we monitor that, and we also can monitor your media coverage as well. So all of that will be part of that database management system. But that's how you can continually communicate with others, by having an accurate database and using these platforms that you see on the ribbon below, whether that's Facebook, whether that's constant contact, sending out e-newsletters, that sort of thing.
Yep, or whatever comes out next, because there's constantly new forms of communication, and a lot of times, you mentioned it earlier, Delcino, is that it depends on your demographic as which platform is going to be the most effective, and not ignoring the traditional methods too, right? It's not just
Yep.
yeah.
You
can't
have your
ignore
legacy media too.
your mom's never going to see anything on that ribbon.
No. So she's still going to read the newspaper and listen to the radio.
That's right.
So you still have the demographic, and there's still some merit to those, to getting the message out. And also consider, do you need to translate any of your communications into other languages based on who you're trying to reach?
That's
and
absolutely.
Do you need to have something for those who may be hearing impaired? So you got to look at all of that. At some of our public meetings, many times we'll have signers there for those who are hearing impaired, just to make sure, and we'll have interpreters also on site for in particular markets that it may be Spanish or it could be something else.
It's interesting that you mentioned that, because with the situation in Puerto Rico with the hurricanes, there's folks that a lot of the folks coming from the mainland going to Puerto Rico from FEMA, Army Corps of Engineers, HHS, VA, and everybody's converging on this place. And most of the people did not speak Spanish, right? So they engaged interpreters, and the challenge was they had to also educate the interpreters on on that dialogue and being empathic in your communications, not just to say, hey, this is what's happening, because your power's out, people are in dire straits, right? So they really just want to know, they need to know what's happening and when they're going to be restored, and being able to continue that communication, and have that work. And the Lighthouse Group was somebody else that did a briefing with us. This is a year ago, I think, when we did it, but it was an amazing story that here you're there to interpret for the people that are helping with the power, and then the people are saying, hey, when am I going to get this, when am I going to get that? And it wasn't in their lane, but they could just from the training, and that really helped them. So I love it. Good stuff all the way around. So now tell us, when do you expect, and some of the folks have already said, just so you know, there's between now and we're obviously in fiscal year Q4 of fiscal year 2020. Can you believe that? That's a crazy thing anyway. It's the middle of July. That still blows my mind. Even at this moment, it's blowing my mind. But there's a lot of folks that already said that they have a requirement. So we're looking forward to hearing back from you guys. A lot of folks had coming in, and I'll share that with you, because there's a lot of, as we follow up with this, we'll make sure that we get them their information that they need from you. So it'll be good. So with that, we're not going to keep this open too awfully long. We want to get to your questions. Questions are coming up next, so stand by. We will absolutely include you in the questions. So we'll give you another 5, 4, 3, 2. It's painless, I promise. 1, 0, and boom. So here's what we got. So a lot of folks have things. Some folks don't know for sure. That's okay, because that's why we're here. This is here to help you guys figure out what you're up against and how to manage it. So now we're going to open up for questions. You can raise your hand. I do have a hand raised. Aaliyah still has her hand raised from earlier, and I can't unmute you. Or I'm going to send an unmute request to you, Aaliyah. And we had one, Blanca, also. I'm going to unmute you and send you an unmute request. So Aaliyah, are you there? Can you you're self-muted. I can't unmute you. And this is one of the things that happens because of these virtual pieces. So questions. You can chat the questions as well down the bottom and chat those. One of the questions is, is this being recorded? The answer is absolutely, positively is being recorded. Number one. Number two, the presentation is also included in the handout, so you can grab it from there, and you'll get a recap email. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. So what are some of your challenges that you guys are having that you would like to Delcino to address? Okay, what are the methods for collecting information? Well, how do you collect information, Delcino?
Yeah, we work with research professionals. They collect it either through surveys, telephone, online, in-person interviews. We've done that. Matter of fact, we're working with a company now that's conducting a disparity study with the Commonwealth, and we're using virtual tools as well to capture information, and we're also using surveys, telephone surveys. So we work very closely with a lot of research specialists.
How do you manage when there's a crisis? How do you manage when there's a crisis with the communications, when the information is not being able to be how do you manage in a crisis when the information cannot be translated properly? How do you manage that? That's an interesting question, Mark.
They mean translated in another language?
Either translate
or getting the facts out there?
Getting not having the methodology to get the facts out there. If the main part of the community, I think it's the main part of the communication, right? Where if you don't have, let's say the TV stations are down or you don't have the ability, what do you do then?
Well, if it's a matter of not having access to technology, then what we do, actually, we go the old-fashioned way. We get information. We have backup communication devices where we can reach the first responders and others to get information in front of people. TV cameras are always going to be fired up, so there are ways to reach the. That's why it's good to have that media list, because I have their cell phone, and so we can reach them that way. May not, the telephone lines may be down, but we have ways of reaching them. And also, it's helpful to have that built into your public engagement plan. What do you do in a crisis when you may not have access to technology or communication lines are down? Then you can use television. Still works. You can still use that. You can use the old-fashioned way. Hold a press conference to get information out in front of people, because the information is still going out. Same thing with the newspaper. So we still continue to utilize those techniques and those tools. But that's why it's so important to have that strong relationship with those in the media and with those that have communication access.
And I like that. And Danette's asking, what are the most effective tools you're using to reach people who are not tech savvy to attend Zoom meetings? If you're not tech savvy to attend Zoom, a lot of people got a crash course in Zoom about 3 months ago. And I got a whole other story I'm not going to go into right now, but there's, to your point. So what are the most effective tools for reaching people who are not tech savvy and still get them to attend Zoom meetings?
Well, whether it's attend a Zoom meeting or that's when the partnerships with the community organizations is important. Whether it's AARP or whether it's a civic league or whether it's working at the library, what have you, there are organizations that we partner with that have access to a particular audience that we want to reach. They may not come to my Zoom meeting, but they will go to one hosted by a group that they belong to, their affinity groups. And we're doing that right now, whether it's a sorority, fraternity, alumni group, environmental group, or others. We will partner with them and get on their agendas. That's part of what we're doing with the Hampton Roads Bridge Tunnel, where we're going to the Rotary clubs, we're going to various groups and community organizations, and become a part of their agenda at their membership meetings. So that's another way of getting the message out, is to work alongside those community partners, those ones that you've deputized already.
And Lisa has one here. Suggest more research into the audience. Hearing impaired isn't a commonly used term in the community. Deaf or hard of hearing is. I agree with that. My daughter does ASL. And there's a whole bunch of information here that we'll make sure you get. But she says, I strongly recommend using interpreter language rather than signers. That's a great point. And then Lauren has, what level of collaboration do you have with disability organizations when distributing information to individuals with a wide array of disabilities and communication needs? Great question, Lauren. How do you collaborate?
Yeah, so I do practice what I preach. I do either I'm serving on a board or I'm part of a group or organization that services whether it's physical, emotional, or psychological disabilities. We work with those organizations now, and those who work with seniors, for instance, organization that helps seniors to remain as independent as possible so they don't have to go into nursing homes. So I work with them. These are all public agencies that we partner with over the years. So I do practice what I preach, where we do cultivate those relationships, and I share those relationships with the clients.
That's fantastic.
So they can leverage their purposes.
And like you said, it's not just it's not just what you would traditionally, deaf, hearing impaired. It's not that, or hard of hearing. I'm sorry, deaf or hard of hearing. Sorry, I'm working on it, Lisa. I'm learning. Deaf or hard of hearing, or different languages. It's also generational, and it's multicultural. It's all of that wrapped into one, because when there's a crisis, it doesn't affect just one set of people, and you can't just concentrate on the main set of people, because you have you have many, many different challenges in communication. I love it.
That's right.
What with the disabled, how do the partners help you get information out? Great question. That's another one from Danette. And then we'll close out. That's the last one for right now. I promise. You can
How do
get
they help?
more
How do they
questions.
help me?
How
Well, because many
with
of
the
these
disabled, how do the partners help you get the information out?
Well, since they already have the relationship with that particular demographic, I will have approved content for them to use on in their various communication platforms, whether that's social media, whether that's direct mail, whether that's a newsletter, or ad in the paper for that matter. They may have a newsletter, or go to maybe they have a board of directors. I can go and do a presentation there. Many of them do have some sort of communication specialist on staff, so I'll do it that way. So I will provide content for them to disseminate to their established platforms that they use already.
And it's leveraging and deputizing those influencers. Love it. Love
Right.
it. That's a good term.
Right.
That's a quality term. All right, we're gonna get you out of here because we appreciate you guys being here. If you would like to talk with Delcino is with the Miles Agency, and there's the DUNS number and the cage code. And if you need any other procurement requirement, GSA schedule, veteran-owned, service disabled, hub zone, SBA, woman-owned, all those things, you are already SBA woman-owned, so you can handle that piece. However, 8A, if you need any of those for procurement purposes, there's partners that you can team with, Delcino, and
Right.
make sure that you get what you need from Delcino Miles and the Miles Agency. Recap email will come next week. It'll include the briefing presentation, all the materials that you have right here, capability statements, as well as the Q&A that we just talked about. And if there's any additional questions that you have, we will include those. And there's a few more that we'll make sure we get out. You also have a link to the video that you can submit to the Academy Awards, of course, because that's just how good Delcino Miles is. And you can watch it over and over. But we want to say thank you very much for joining us. And Delcino, great information. Love what you do. It's a very interesting niche, and expanding into the crisis management. I think when we started talking about transportation, I was like, I didn't even know that existed. So awesome information. But thanks for sharing that with us. And any parting comments for everybody?
I appreciate everybody's time and your questions. I appreciate that. And we're here to serve. And communications is always something that is important, whether it's in your marriage, your family, who's going to plan the next family reunion, or who is going to develop your public involvement plan. So communications is always important in human relations.
Yep. There's a whole level of therapy when you're planning a wedding.
That's right. So thank you for this opportunity.
Influencers and decision makers, and Aunt Martha, or whatever the heck he had on your team. So, awesome. Well, thank you so much again, Delcino. Thanks for joining us, everybody. And tomorrow, there's the one that's happening tomorrow is very, very uniquely tied in with this, and that is the surveys and data collection. Huge issue. A lot of folks that are here are going to be there. So we're looking forward to seeing you all again tomorrow. I shall talk to you later. Thanks, Delcino. Thanks again.
Thank you.